At my brother's big promotion party. He found it amusing to introduce me this way. My sister. No diploma, no prospects, just freeloads off the family. Everyone present, our own parents too, laughed. I didn't flinch. I merely smiled, raised my glass, and declared a toast. This is the final time you'll ever see me. Then I walked out. The room became utterly silent. Have you ever felt so utterly betrayed, so completely dismissed, that it reshaped your entire world? For me, it was at my brother's big promotion party, a night that started with hope and ended with him tearing me down in front of everyone, forever changing who I thought my family was. Hi, I'm Jenna. I'm a 28-year-old artist from Boston, and for most of my life, family was everything. Especially my relationship with my brother, Adam. He was 3 years older, and while he chased degrees and corporate success, I followed my passion for art. My parents? Well, they weren't exactly thrilled about my choices. But I never, ever imagined that at his shining moment, his big promotion celebration, my own brother would use me as the family joke. That night, though, it didn't just change everything between us, it changed me forever. Let me rewind a bit. I grew up in a household where academic achievement wasn't just encouraged, it was basically mandatory. My dad, Thomas, was this renowned cardiothoracic surgeon, and every dinner conversation was filled with tales of his latest life-saving procedure. My mom, Diana, was a tenured English professor, publishing in prestigious journals, racking up awards. Their wedding photos even showed them in academic regalia, 3 advanced degrees between them, proudly displayed. Then there was Adam, my brother. He was the living embodiment of everything my parents valued. Perfect report cards, science fair wins, debate team captain, valedictorian. Harvard Law acceptance letters from all 8 Ivy Leagues. My parents practically glowed with pride. I swear I thought their faces might crack. And I loved him truly. Before academics consumed him, we built blanket forts, had epic backyard adventures, and shared whispered secrets after bedtime. He protected me from bullies, taught me to ride my bike. For years, he was my hero, my confidant, my best friend. But then, in high school, something shifted. His accomplishments created this growing distance between us, widening with every awards ceremony and honor roll. Meanwhile, I struggled. Seriously struggled. My second-grade teacher called my parents in because I kept drawing elaborate pictures instead of doing math worksheets. In middle school, my report cards always said bright but unfocused, creative but distractible. High school was just endurance. I could write compelling essays, create stunning art projects, but standardized tests? They were my nemesis. Numbers swam, dates vanished, scientific formulas felt like a foreign language. But my art? My art flourished. I won regional competitions, had pieces in youth galleries, got praise from professional artists. At our dinner table, though, these were met with quick nods before the conversation inevitably swung back to Adam's latest academic triumph or my parents' professional successes. When college application season hit, the inevitable family war erupted. I wanted art school. They insisted on a traditional 4-year university, maybe an art minor if I maintained perfect grades. My dad, Thomas, actually declared he wouldn't waste money on a degree in finger painting. I shot back that I wouldn't waste years studying subjects that would never serve my future. My mom tried to mediate but always sided with my dad. Adam, home from his first year at Harvard, pulled me aside during one particularly bitter argument. I thought, finally, someone who understands. But instead, he just advised me to get the degree to make everyone happy. It was the first time I truly realized he didn't see my art as a legitimate path. To him, it was just stubbornness, not passion. So, after graduation, while my classmates headed to dorms and orientations, I made my decision. I took a job at a local coffee shop, rented a tiny studio apartment with 2 roommates, and enrolled in night classes at a community art center. My parents predicted I'd come crawling back within 6 months, begging for tuition. Adam bet it would be 3. Those early years? Brutal. Ramen noodles were a luxury. I worked multiple service jobs, took any design gig I could find, building my portfolio piece by painstaking piece. Logos for local businesses, wedding invitations, illustrations for self-publishing authors. I survived on determination, sheer grit. Family gatherings, which got more and more infrequent, were torture. When will you get a real job? When will you go back to school? My answers about building my freelance business were met with skeptical looks and immediate subject changes. 10 years passed like this. Adam graduated Harvard Law with honors, clerked for a federal judge, landed at Peterson and Mitchell, one of Boston's most prestigious corporate law firms. Meanwhile, I was slowly but surely building a reputation in graphic design. My client base grew, allowing me to quit the service jobs and focus entirely on creative work. I got my own apartment, built a professional website, even hired an assistant. My designs won awards in industry publications. Bigger companies started calling. Not that my family noticed. At holidays, my parents still introduced Adam as our son, the lawyer, while I remained their daughter with the hobby. When I shared news about a major client or industry recognition, it was always met with polite disinterest, then an immediate pivot to Adam's latest courtroom victory. So, when the invitation arrived for Adam's promotion party, I felt that familiar mix of obligation and dread. 5 years at Peterson and Mitchell, and he was being made partner, the youngest in the firm's history. My mom called to make sure I'd attend, adding that I should wear something appropriate, not your usual artistic outfits. The subtle dig stung, but I agreed to go. Despite everything, I still held on to this tiny hope that someday my success would register with them. That they would finally see my path as valid, valuable. I never imagined that party would become the breaking point. The night that would sever my family ties and force me to completely redefine my sense of self-worth. The invitation specified black tie, so I invested in a midnight blue gown I honestly couldn't afford. Elegant, not flashy. The kind of dress that said, I belong here. I spent $300 on it, money I probably should have saved for new design software, and another $100 on shoes just so my fashion-conscious mother wouldn't be embarrassed. I even got my hair professionally styled, something I never did. The week before the party, I poured myself into my studio, creating a custom piece for Adam. Despite our complicated relationship, I wanted to give him something meaningful. I designed a stylized Boston skyline, subtly incorporating landmarks from our childhood, the park where we played, the old ice cream shop. And, almost hidden, 2 tiny figures that resembled us as children. It took 16 hours. I had it professionally framed with museum-quality glass. This wasn't just a gift, it was a demonstration of my professional skill and personal connection. I hoped it would make him see the value in my chosen path. That morning, I rehearsed responses to the inevitable career questions. Concise descriptions of projects, impressive client names, practiced explanations of my business growth. I reminded myself, my annual income now matches many college graduates. I own my work. I built something from nothing with talent and perseverance. Standing in front of the mirror, I practiced smiling through uncomfortable comments. I'm doing well, thank you. Business has been excellent. Just signed a national retail chain. No, I don't regret college. The freelance market is robust. I took an Uber to the venue, a historic hotel in downtown Boston. The driver asked if I was attending a special event, and I felt a surge of pride as I explained my brother was being made partner. For that brief ride, I actually basked in reflected glory, in familial connection. I had no idea how the night would truly unfold. The hotel lobby gleamed with marble and crystal. My parents were already there, chatting with Adam's colleagues. My mom in a designer dress, my dad in a custom-tailored tuxedo. Striking, distinguished, in their early 60s. I called out a greeting. My dad just nodded, continuing his conversation. My mom turned, gave me a quick assessment, then a kiss that barely landed. You're late, she whispered, smoothing her already smooth hair. The invitation said 7, I replied, showing her the card. The family was asked to arrive early, she frowned. Adam specifically mentioned it. Didn't he call you? He didn't, I said, though I knew it wasn't an oversight. Adam had long stopped including me in family coordination. Well, you're here now, she said, already turning back to her group. Find your place card. Table 11, I believe. My dad finished his conversation long enough for a brief, one-armed hug. Good to see you, Jennifer, he said, using my full name as always. It's Jenna, Dad, I corrected automatically, a futile gesture I'd made for 28 years. Right. He nodded distractedly, then spotted someone across the room. Excuse me, that's Judge Williams. I should say hello. I stood alone for a moment before making my way into the ballroom. Round tables, white linens, miniature law books as centerpieces. A string quartet played softly. Adam was immediately visible, tall, broad-shouldered like our father, at the center of an admiring circle. His tuxedo perfect, hair expertly styled, gestures confident. Success looked natural on him. I hesitated, clutching my gift bag. Adam glanced up, saw me, and broke away. Jenna, you made it, he said, kissing my cheek. Expensive cologne, a practiced smile. Congratulations on the promotion, I said sincerely. This is quite a celebration. Firm tradition, he replied with a casual wave. Most guests are colleagues and clients, but I insisted on family too. Though I see you missed the photos. I wasn't told about them, I said, keeping my tone light. I brought you something. I extended the gift bag. Adam took it with a distracted thank you, immediately setting it on a nearby table without even looking inside. I'll check it out later. Come meet some people. He led me to a group of impeccably dressed professionals. This is my sister, Adam announced, offering neither my name nor my profession. One woman extended her hand. Stephanie Morris, head of corporate litigation. What firm are you with? Before I could answer, Adam laughed. Oh, Jenna's not a lawyer. She's an artist. She draws pictures. I'm actually a graphic designer, I clarified. I run my own studio specializing in branding and commercial illustration. How interesting, Stephanie said, in that tone people use when something is anything but interesting. And where did you study? I'm self-taught, I replied, keeping my voice steady. I've been building my business for 10 years now. Adam jumped in. Jenna decided college wasn't her thing. He made air quotes around decided, drawing knowing smiles from his colleagues. Excuse me, I said, pretending to spot someone across the room. I need to say hello to someone. I retreated to the bar, ordered a glass of white wine, and took a steadying breath. The evening had barely begun, and already I felt diminished. I reminded myself, I have nothing to prove to these people. My work speaks for itself. My clients value my talent. My bank account validates my choices. But the small cuts kept coming. At dinner, I was seated at a table far from the main party with distant relatives and administrative staff. Any interest in my work evaporated the moment I mentioned my lack of formal education. During the pre-dessert mingling, my mother introduced me to her university colleagues as her daughter, who has always been creative, her tone suggesting creativity was a charming but ultimately useless trait. I overheard my father telling his medical friends about Adam's academic achievements, from kindergarten perfect attendance to law school law review. When someone politely asked about me, he replied that I was finding my way, still figuring things out. I was 28 with an established business, but in his eyes, I remained eternally unfinished, permanently in progress. As dessert was being served, the firm's managing partner took to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to celebrate our newest partner, Adam Harrison. Applause filled the room as Adam made his way to the stage, looking perfectly at ease, born for the spotlight. I clapped along, still clinging to the hope that somewhere in his speech, he might acknowledge that success comes in different forms. I watched with anticipation, convinced he would publicly recognize our family. I couldn't have imagined how wrong I was about to be. The ballroom itself was a symbol of everything my family valued: luxury, tradition, exclusivity. Crystal chandeliers, pressed white tablecloths, polished silver. Fresh floral arrangements, their perfume mixing with expensive cologne and gourmet food. Everything reinforced that this was a place for people who had followed the rules, climbed the proper ladders. I observed the social dynamics, the clear hierarchy. Senior partners commanded attention, junior associates laughed a bit too loudly at their superiors' jokes. Family members of other lawyers greeted each other with easy familiarity. I recognized no one. Then an older gentleman approached my isolated corner. Harold Peterson, the founding partner, now semi-retired. He had kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. "You must be Adam's sister," he said, extending his hand. "You look like him around the eyes." "I am," I confirmed. "Jenna Harrison." "Adam speaks highly of your creative talents," he said, surprising me completely. "My granddaughter is interested in art. Do you have any advice for young people pursuing creative fields?" For a moment, I felt visible. I enthusiastically shared thoughts on building portfolios, finding mentors, developing business skills alongside artistic ones. Mr. Peterson listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions. Our conversation was interrupted when my mother appeared, slipping her arm through Mr. Peterson's. "Harold, I see you've met Jenna," she said. "I hope she hasn't been boring you with her little projects." "Not at all," he replied. We were having a fascinating discussion about creative entrepreneurship. My mother laughed, as if he'd said something amusing rather than factual. "Well, there's someone you simply must meet," she said, already steering him away. "The university president is here, and he's been asking about your scholarship fund." Mr. Peterson allowed himself to be led away, but turned back to give me a sympathetic smile. "Nice meeting you, Jenna. Keep up the good work." That brief, positive interaction only highlighted how uncomfortable the rest of the evening had been. I tried to join a conversation between my father and several doctors, only to have him place his hand on my shoulder and guide me away with a whispered, "This is a discussion about hospital politics, Jennifer. You wouldn't understand the context." When I tried chatting with a group of younger lawyers, they became awkwardly formal once they realized I wasn't in the legal profession, their eyes scanning the room for more advantageous networking opportunities. Even the catering staff seemed to sense my outsider status, passing me by repeatedly before I could take an appetizer. Around 9 o'clock, the gift presentation began. Partners and colleagues presented Adam with expensive tokens of their esteem, monogrammed cufflinks, rare whiskey, vintage law books. Each gift was met with appropriate appreciation and witty remarks. My mother nudged me. "You said you brought something." I nodded, retrieving my carefully wrapped package. As I approached Adam, he was deep in conversation. I stood awkwardly, waiting. "Excuse me," I finally said after nearly a minute of being ignored. Adam turned with barely concealed impatience. "Yes, I wanted to give you this," I said, offering the package. "I made it for your promotion." He took it with a distracted thanks and carelessly tore the wrapping. No careful appreciation like he'd shown for the others. The custom frame caught the light as he held up the artwork with a puzzled expression. "It's the Boston skyline," I explained, with places from our childhood hidden in the details. "See, there's the park where we used to play and the ice cream shop on the corner. And those two small figures there are." "That's nice," he interrupted, clearly uninterested in the personal touches that had taken me hours. He set the artwork against the wall without even finishing his examination. "Not really my style, but thanks for the thought." My mother appeared beside him, glancing at the piece. "Oh, another one of your drawings," she said, as if I'd presented him with a crayon scribble rather than a professional piece worth hundreds of dollars. "That's sweet, dear." She picked it up and squinted. "Is this supposed to be Boston? The proportions seem off." "It's stylized, Mom," I explained, trying to keep the disappointment from my voice. "It's not meant to be photorealistic." "Well, it's the thought that counts," she said, setting it back down and straightening Adam's already perfect tie. The photos from earlier came out beautifully. The photographer said he's never seen such a photogenic family. The implication that the family photos were complete without me wasn't lost on anyone. As dinner concluded and the formal program approached, I found myself increasingly isolated. I checked my watch repeatedly, calculating how soon I could leave without causing a scene. The answer, unfortunately, was not until after Adam's speech and at least the first dance. I made my way to the ladies' room for a moment of peace. Inside, I found two young women, legal associates from Adam's table. They were touching up their makeup and didn't notice me enter a stall. "Can you believe his sister?" the first one said. "She looks so out of place." "I know," the second agreed. Adam told me she's some kind of starving artist who refused to go to college. His parents are still supporting her financially. I froze. Blood rushed to my face. The accusation was completely, utterly false. I hadn't taken money from my parents since I was 20, not even when I'd had pneumonia and couldn't work for 6 weeks. I'd eaten ramen and depleted my savings rather than ask for help. Such a disappointment compared to him, the first woman continued. He said they keep inviting her to family events out of obligation, but she doesn't really fit with their social circle. I must have made a sound, because both women suddenly went silent. I waited until they left before emerging, hands shaking as I washed them at the sink. My reflection showed flushed cheeks and overly bright eyes. I took several deep breaths, determined not to let them see me affected. Returning to the ballroom, I found the lights dimmed, attention focused on the small stage. My father caught my eye from the front table and frowned, gesturing at his watch. I slipped into an empty seat at the back, unwilling to cause a scene by walking to the family table. Now, as Adam took the microphone, I tried to focus on breathing evenly. I still believed, despite everything, that when he acknowledged his family support, he would include me with some small, kind mention. Maybe a joke about his artistic sister who took a different path. Maybe even a thank you for attending despite our differences. I couldn't have been more wrong. And the moment that proved it was rapidly approaching. Adam stood there, commanding the attention of everyone. The spotlight emphasized his perfect posture, his confident smile, his tailored tuxedo. He began by thanking the firm partners, delivering carefully crafted compliments. The crowd nodded. He spoke about his commitment to the firm's values, his vision for its legacy. I started to relax slightly. Perhaps the speech will remain purely professional, I thought, sparing me any family references at all. That would be better than a negative mention. I could slip out during the applause, text my congratulations later from the safety of my apartment. But then Adam shifted gears. Now, for the personal acknowledgments, he said, his voice warming. I wouldn't be standing here tonight without the unwavering support of my family. The spotlight widened to include my parents at their front row table. They beamed with pride. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. My father, Dr. Thomas Harrison, Adam continued, taught me the value of precision, excellence, and dedication. My mother, Professor Diana Harrison, instilled in me a love of language and persuasive communication. Together, they showed me that with discipline and focus, any goal is achievable. My parents stood to receive a round of applause. My father placed his hand over his heart. My mother blew Adam a discreet kiss. I clapped along, feeling the familiar pang of exclusion, but nothing I hadn't experienced before. Maybe he would stop there. Maybe family acknowledgments were complete. Adam raised his champagne glass. I'd like everyone to raise a glass to the people who shaped me into the man I am today. The room complied, glasses lifting in unison. To my mentors, my parents, and my friends, Adam said. And of course. His eyes scanned the room until they found me, in my back corner. A smile spread across his face that sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't his genuine smile, but the one I'd seen when he was about to win an argument at someone else's expense. And of course, Adam continued, gesturing toward me with his glass, to my sister, Jenna, who joined us tonight. The spotlight swung wildly, locating me, its brightness temporarily blinding after the dimness of my corner. I felt every eye in the room turn to examine me. I managed a small smile, a slight nod, hoping this moment would pass quickly. Adam chuckled into the microphone. For those who don't know her, this is my sister. No degree, no future, just freeloads off the family. She's our cautionary tale of what happens when you don't apply yourself. The room erupted in laughter. My parents, rather than defending me, joined in. My father shook his head in mock disapproval. My mother covered her smile with her hand. Both clearly comfortable with me as the family joke. The spotlight remained fixed on me, exposing every micro-expression that crossed my face. Heat flooded my cheeks. A rushing sound filled my ears. Time seemed to slow, each second stretching painfully as the laughter continued. In that moment, something crystallized within me. This wasn't a one-time humiliation. This was simply the public version of how my family had always seen me. Every diminished accomplishment, every backhanded compliment, every comparison to Adam suddenly appeared in perfect clarity as parts of a consistent pattern. I had been the family disappointment from the moment I chose my own path, and nothing I achieved would ever change that perception. I had two choices. I could flee the room in tears, confirming their belief in my instability and immaturity. Or I could respond with the dignity they clearly didn't think I possessed. With deliberate calm, I stood up. The laughter began to subside as people noticed my movement. I walked slowly toward the front of the room, feeling the weight of every gaze. The spotlight followed me, highlighting my journey from shadow to center stage. When I reached the main table, I picked up an untouched champagne flute. I looked directly at Adam, still standing at the microphone. His expression had shifted from smug amusement to slight confusion. He hadn't expected a reaction beyond embarrassed acceptance or a hasty departure. I raised my glass toward him, mirroring his earlier gesture. My hand was perfectly steady. I smiled. Not a hurt smile, not an angry one, but the calm smile of someone making a life-changing decision with absolute certainty. "Cheers," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the now silent room. "This is the last time any of you will see me." I took a sip of champagne, set the glass down gently, and turned to leave. The click of my heels against the hardwood floor echoed in the complete silence that had fallen over the ballroom. No one called after me. No one tried to stop me. Perhaps they thought it was a dramatic gesture rather than a genuine farewell. As I retrieved my wrap from the coat check, I heard the hum of conversation resume behind me, Adam's amplified voice making some joke to dispel the awkwardness. By the time I stepped into the cool night air, applause had broken out again, the celebration continuing without interruption. In the taxi home, I didn't cry. I felt oddly calm, like someone watching a film of someone else's life. City lights blurred past the window as I made mental lists of what needed to be done. This wasn't an impulsive reaction, but the final acknowledgement of a truth I had been avoiding for years. My family would never see me as I truly was, and continuing to seek their approval would only destroy me, piece by agonizing piece. The driver asked if I was okay. I realized I'd been sitting in silence outside my apartment building for several minutes. "Yes," I replied, surprising myself with how certain I felt. "For the first time in years, I think I really am." The moment I entered my apartment, I switched my phone to airplane mode. I knew the texts and calls would start once the event ended. I needed time to think clearly, without their voices in my head. My cat, Jasper, greeted me with his usual indifference that gradually shifted to curiosity as I began pulling luggage from my closet instead of changing into pajamas. I moved with purpose. Clothes for a week, my laptop, essential toiletries, external hard drives with all my work files, and a small box of irreplaceable personal items. Everything else could be replaced or retrieved later. Jasper watched from the bed, tail twitching, as I moved with unusual energy for midnight. When my suitcase and laptop bag were packed, I picked up Jasper and held him close, breathing in his familiar scent. I'd rescued him from a shelter 3 years earlier, a scraggly, one-eyed tabby no one wanted. We understood each other. "I need to make some calls, buddy," I whispered, scratching behind his ears, the kind you make when no one is listening. I booked a pet-friendly hotel room downtown for 2 weeks, paying the premium without hesitation. I emailed my 2 current clients, explaining I had a family emergency and would be working remotely, but assuring them all deadlines would be met. I set up mail forwarding to a post office box I'd established the next day. At 2 a.m., I finally turned my phone back on. As expected, multiple missed calls and texts. Most from my mother, ranging from confused, "Where did you go?" to irritated, "You're being very dramatic," to concerned, "Are you driving? Please respond." My father had called once but left no message. Adam hadn't reached out at all. I texted my mother simply, "I'm safe. I need space. Please respect that." Then I turned off my phone again, set my alarm for 7, and tried to sleep. When sleep wouldn't come, I stared at the ceiling, mentally redesigning my life from scratch. At 7, I loaded Jasper into his carrier, bags into an Uber, and left my apartment, key with my neighbor Lisa, asking her to water my plants until I figured out next steps. She didn't ask questions, just hugged me and said to call if I needed anything. Some people understand boundaries instinctively. The hotel room was small but clean, with a kitchenette and decent Wi-Fi. I set up my laptop, created a makeshift litter box area, and unpacked just enough to function. Then I made a list of practical tasks: find a new apartment, preferably in a different neighborhood or even a different city. Notify my landlord. Update my business contact information. Establish new banking relationships, separate from my family's. By 9, my phone had 67 notifications. I ignored them and called a real estate agent instead, explaining I needed a short-term rental with an option to buy, budget flexible, available immediately. The urgency in my voice must have communicated itself because she promised to send listings that same day. I worked through the morning, focusing on a branding project. The familiar rhythm of design calmed me, the creative flow pushing away thoughts of the previous night. Around noon, I finally checked my messages. My mother had progressed from concern to anger. Your behavior was completely inappropriate. Adam was embarrassed. We expect an apology. My father was more direct. This childish attention-seeking needs to stop. Call your mother. But there were also 3 messages from numbers I didn't recognize. The first was from Harold Peterson. Your brother's comments were out of line. If you're interested in design work for our firm's rebranding, please call me. The second was from Adam's colleague, Stephanie. That was the most dignified exit I've ever witnessed. Adam was wrong about you. Let me know if you need a good lawyer. The third was from my cousin Taylor, my only relative who had chosen a non-traditional path. Whatever you're doing, I support you. Been there. Call me if you need a friendly voice. These unexpected allies brought the first tears since the incident. I hadn't realized how completely I'd internalized my family's narrative about my isolation and failure. There were people who saw me differently, who recognized something in me worth supporting. I saved their numbers, but wasn't ready to respond yet. I spent that first week in a productive blur. During the day, I worked on client projects with new intensity. Evenings were dedicated to researching locations where I might restart my life: New York, Chicago, Seattle, anywhere with a strong creative economy and no family connections. I interviewed 3 potential assistants, eventually hiring Zach, a recent design school graduate with no ties to Boston's interconnected social world. My mother's texts grew increasingly frantic. By day 5, she was threatening a missing persons report, despite my clear message that I was safe. I finally responded with a formal email, copying my father. I am not missing. I am taking necessary space from a family dynamic that has become harmful to my well-being. I am safe, employed, and housed. Please do not contact the authorities with false concerns, as that would waste their resources and damage our relationship further. I will reach out when I am ready to communicate. The response came within minutes, a lengthy email from my father detailing all the ways they had supported me, the sacrifices they had made, and the ingratitude I was showing. He referenced family therapy as though it were a threat. The message contained not one word of apology for Adam's behavior or acknowledgement of why I might have been hurt. I forwarded the email to a new therapist I'd scheduled an appointment with, adding context for our first session tomorrow. 10 days after the party, I found my new home, a loft apartment in Philadelphia's Arts District. The real estate agent sent a virtual tour, highlighting the Northern Light, perfect for a studio, the building's community of creative professionals, and the reasonable cost of living compared to Boston. I signed a 6-month lease with an option to buy and booked a moving company for the following week. I wrote a cordial letter to my landlord, enclosed a check for the lease termination fee, and arranged for a cleaning service. I updated my business address, opened new accounts at a national bank with no Boston presence, and found a vet for Jasper. Methodically, I untangled my life from its Boston roots. Each practical step felt like removing a weight I hadn't known I was carrying. The night before leaving Boston, I drove to my apartment to collect a few remaining items. I half expected to find my parents waiting, ready for a dramatic confrontation. Instead, the building was quiet, my apartment clean and empty, looking smaller than I remembered. I left my keys on the counter with a note for the landlord. As I carried the last box to my car, I realized I hadn't cried since that first day in the hotel. The pain had transformed into purposeful action. Each decision a step toward a self-determined life. The drive to Philadelphia the next morning felt symbolic, sunrise at my back as I headed south and west, toward a city where no one knew me as Adam's underachieving sister or the Harrisons' disappointing daughter. I was simply a graphic designer, new tenant, cat owner, person in progress. I had no illusions that geographic distance alone would heal the wounds inflicted over decades. But as the Boston skyline disappeared in my rearview mirror, I allowed myself to imagine a life defined by my own values, rather than my family's expectations. That possibility alone made the road ahead look brighter than the one behind. Philadelphia welcomed me with neither fanfare nor resistance, just the neutral acceptance of a city accustomed to reinvention. My loft was in a converted textile factory, all exposed brick and oversized windows. The building housed a community of creative professionals, a photographer, several writers, a furniture maker, a small advertising agency. They nodded hello, but asked few questions, respecting the unspoken understanding that everyone had their own story, their own reasons for being there. I methodically established my new studio. The southern half became my workspace, the northern my living space, though the boundaries often blurred. Jasper claimed a sunny window seat, seemingly unbothered by the change in scenery. For the first month, I maintained radio silence with my family, despite escalating attempts at contact. My mother progressed from concerned texts to emotional voicemails to a remarkably tone-deaf email suggesting I was having a nervous breakdown because I couldn't handle Adam's success. My father took a more direct approach, using his hospital connections to get my new address, sending a certified letter reminding me of all the ways I had disappointed them, culminating in my ungrateful departure. The letter concluded that when I was ready to apologize and behave like an adult, they would welcome me back. I scanned both communications and forwarded them to Dr. Melissa Jenkins, the therapist I had started seeing weekly. In our sessions, she helped me recognize patterns I had normalized, the constant comparisons, the dismissal of my achievements, the subtle undermining of my confidence. We worked on separating my self-worth from their approval, a process that felt like untangling a lifetime of twisted threads. When my family's attempts went unanswered, they recruited extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't spoken with in years suddenly texted with casual, "How are you?" That inevitably led to, "Don't you think you're being hard on your parents?" I responded politely but firmly that I was taking necessary space for my well-being and appreciated their respect for that boundary. Only Cousin Taylor remained a genuine ally, calling occasionally without pressure or judgment. When I finally told her the full story of the promotion party, her response was refreshingly direct. "What an absolute dick move. You deserve better. This family has a serious problem with anyone coloring outside the lines." As the weeks turned into months, I immersed myself in building my business in this new city. I joined the Philadelphia Graphic Artists Guild, attending meetings, forming professional connections. I accepted an invitation to speak at a community college about entrepreneurship in creative fields, sharing my journey with students who reminded me of my younger self. 6 months after the move, I received an unexpected email from Harold Peterson, the founding partner of Adam's law firm. He remembered our brief conversation at the party and was impressed by both my portfolio and my dignified exit that night. His firm was undergoing a complete rebranding, and he wanted to know if I would consider submitting a proposal. The irony was impossible to miss. My first major opportunity in my new life, coming from the very event that had ended my old one. I accepted the invitation, putting together the most professional presentation of my career. When I returned to Boston for the pitch meeting, I stayed in a hotel, told no one in my family I was in town, and focused entirely on business. To my surprise and delight, the firm selected my proposal over those from several larger agencies, citing my personal attention and fresh perspective. The project took 3 months, leading to referrals to 2 other Boston law firms. I hired Zach full-time and brought on a junior designer, Mia, a recent art school graduate with exceptional talent but no connections. I recognized in her the same hunger to prove herself that had driven me for years. Around this time, I received my first communication from Adam since that night. His email was brief, unapologetic. "I hear you're working with Peterson and Mitchell now. Using my connections to build your business, huh? You're welcome. Let's put this family drama behind us. Mom and Dad's anniversary is coming up." I read it twice before crafting a response. "Adam, my business relationship with Peterson and Mitchell is based on my professional capabilities, which Harold Peterson recognized independently. I didn't use your name to secure the contract, nor would I. Regarding our family situation, what you perceive as drama, I experience as necessary boundaries. Your comments at your promotion party were merely the final example of a lifelong pattern of dismissal and disrespect. Until there is genuine acknowledgement and apology for that pattern, I have nothing further to discuss. I wish you continued success in your career. Jenna." I didn't receive a reply, nor did I expect one, but composing the email without anger, without a desperate need for his approval, felt like concrete evidence of my growing emotional independence. As my first year in Philadelphia drew to a close, my business had expanded beyond initial expectations. The Peterson and Mitchell project led to a feature in a design industry magazine highlighting my approach to rebranding traditional institutions. The exposure brought inquiries from companies across the Northeast, allowing me to be selective about projects. With financial security came the confidence to explore new creative directions. I developed a series of workshops for self-taught artists navigating the business side of creative careers. The first sold out, confirming my unconventional path held value for others. Through the workshops, I met Jordan, a web developer specializing in platforms for artists. Our professional collaboration evolved into friendship, then a romantic relationship built on mutual respect and shared creative values. Unlike previous partners who had either pitted my family situation or encouraged reconciliation regardless of cost, Jordan understood the importance of boundaries and self-respect. When I told him the full story of the promotion party, his response was exactly what I needed. "That must have hurt terribly." And your response was incredibly brave. With this growing support system, friends, colleagues, Jordan, I began to recognize that family could be chosen, not merely inherited. These were people who valued me for exactly who I was. Around the 18-month mark after leaving Boston, I was nominated for the Emerging Entrepreneur Award from the American Design Association. The irony was rich. My supposed lack of future had evolved into national recognition of my business acumen and creative leadership. The award ceremony would be in New York, and I was expected to give a short acceptance speech if I won. I didn't tell my family. Their validation was no longer necessary for me to recognize my own achievements. Instead, I invited Jordan, Mia, Zach, and cousin Taylor as my guests. The night of the ceremony, wearing a designer dress I had easily afforded, I sat surrounded by people who genuinely celebrated my success. When they called my name as the winner, the applause felt authentic, not obligatory. Standing at the podium, looking out at a room full of industry peers who valued my work on its own merits, I felt a sense of belonging I had never experienced in family gatherings. My speech acknowledged the untraditional path that had brought me there, thanking those who had supported my vision rather than trying to reshape it. I didn't mention my family directly, but I included a line that Taylor later told me made her tear up. "Sometimes the most important step in finding your true path is having the courage to walk away from those who cannot see its value." The next morning, my phone contained congratulatory messages, but also an unexpected text from my mother. "Saw your award online. Your father and I are confused about why we weren't invited or mentioned. When will this punishment end?" Her message crystallized how little had changed in their perspective, how completely they had missed the point of my departure. It wasn't punishment, it was protection. I showed the text to Jordan, who simply said, "Still making it about them, huh?" I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I spent the day exploring New York with my chosen family, celebrating not just the award, but the life I had built from scratch. That evening, browsing through an art supply store, I realized I was genuinely happy. Not the performance of happiness I had maintained through years of family gatherings, but authentic joy built on self-determination and genuine connection. 2 years after walking out of Adam's promotion party, I had transformed from the family disappointment into an award-winning business owner with a thriving creative practice, meaningful relationships, and hard-won self-respect. The journey hadn't been easy or linear, but each step had carried me further from the limiting narrative my family had constructed and closer to the truth of who I could become when freed from their expectations. What I couldn't have anticipated was that the next phase of this journey would involve confronting the past directly, rather than simply building around its absence. The opportunity to do so arrived unexpectedly, testing whether my newfound strengths could withstand direct contact with the people who had spent a lifetime undermining it. The industry conference in Chicago marked the third anniversary of my departure from Boston. I was invited to speak on a panel about entrepreneurship in creative fields, sharing the stage with designers I had once admired from afar. My business had grown to a team of 6, with offices in both Philadelphia and New York. The days of questioning my path had long since faded, replaced by the quiet confidence that comes from building something enduring. During the networking lunch, I was deep in conversation when I felt a tap on my shoulder. Turning, I found myself face to face with Adam for the first time since that night at the Fairmont Hotel. He looked essentially the same, perfectly tailored suit, confident posture, practiced smile. Yet something in his eyes had changed, a hint of uncertainty that had never been there before. "Jenna," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "I thought that was you on the speaker list. You look different." I nodded, maintaining my professional composure. "Adam, this is unexpected. Are you attending the conference?" He shook his head. "I'm representing a client who's sponsoring the event. I saw your name in the program." An awkward silence fell between us. 3 years of unspoken words, creating an almost tangible barrier. Finally, Adam cleared his throat. "Do you have time for a coffee?" he asked, gesturing toward the hotel lobby. I considered refusing, using my busy schedule as an excuse, but curiosity prevailed. I excused myself from the potential client, promising to follow up, and accompanied Adam to the lobby cafe. We sat at a small table, both stiff and formal. Adam ordered an espresso. I chose herbal tea. When the server left, he studied me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're doing well," he observed. "I see your work everywhere now." The Madison Avenue campaign was particularly impressive. I was surprised he had noticed, much less remembered my work. "Thank you," I replied. "How are things at Peterson and Mitchell?" "Busy," he said. "I'm on track for managing partner next year." "Congratulations," I said, and meant it. His ambition had always been clear, and his achievements were genuine, whatever I thought of his personal behavior. Another silence descended, heavier this time. Adam fidgeted with his espresso cup, uncharacteristically hesitant. "Look," he finally said, "about what happened at my promotion party." I waited, curious whether he would actually acknowledge the harm he'd caused, or simply minimize it as family drama. I was out of line, he admitted, surprising me. The joke wasn't funny, and it wasn't accurate. I knew that even then. "It wasn't a joke, Adam," I replied evenly. "It was public humiliation, and it wasn't isolated. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being diminished and dismissed by my own family." He flinched slightly, but didn't deny it. "I know. I've had time to think about it, especially after Harold Peterson took me aside the following week and asked me what kind of man publicly mocks his own sister for laughs." That must have been uncomfortable, I observed, feeling a surge of gratitude toward the older lawyer who had seen my value when my own brother couldn't. "It was," Adam acknowledged, "especially since he followed it up by telling me you were doing the branding for the firm and your work was exceptional. He suggested I had misjudged you rather severely." I sipped my tea, letting the moment stretch. Adam had never been good at apologies. Acknowledgement was probably the best I could expect. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he continued, surprising me again. "But I want you to know I've regretted it. Not just because it made me look bad, but because it was wrong. You've built something impressive, completely on your own terms. That takes courage." "I'm not sure I have." The admission cost him. I could see it in the tight set of his jaw. The golden child acknowledging his sister's strength challenged the narrative he'd constructed about himself. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "It matters, even now." "Mom and Dad ask about you," he said, shifting the conversation. "They've seen your success. Dad even cut out that article about you in Business Monthly." I raised an eyebrow. "Have they acknowledged they were wrong?" Adam hesitated. "They're still working through that part, but they miss you. They're getting older. Maybe there's room for a relationship that doesn't require you to be who they wanted you to be." I considered his words carefully. Is that possible? After a lifetime of their expectations, can they really accept who I actually am? "I don't know," he admitted. "But they're talking about trying. That's something." We finished our drinks in a more comfortable silence. As we prepared to leave, Adam handed me his business card with his personal number on the back. "No pressure," he said, "but if you ever want to talk, or even just exchange occasional texts, I'd like that. The family dinners are pretty boring with just the three of us." I smiled slightly, remembering a time when those dinners had been torture for me. Yet now he found them lacking. I took the card and gave him mine in return. "I'll think about it," I promised. And we parted ways, not as the close siblings we'd once been, but not as strangers either. Something new had formed in that cafe, the possibility of a relationship based on mutual respect rather than hierarchy. A month later, I received an email from my mother. Unlike her previous communications, this one didn't demand or accuse. Instead, it was surprisingly reflective. "Dear Jenna," it began, "Adam mentioned he saw you at the Chicago conference. He said you looked well and that your business is thriving. I've been following your success from afar through industry publications. Your father and I have been doing some reflecting, prompted in part by our age and in part by your continued absence from our lives. While we may not fully understand the choices you've made, we can see that they have led you to a place of success, and we hope happiness. We would like an opportunity to see you again on your terms. Perhaps a neutral meeting place for lunch or coffee when you're next in Boston. With love, Mom." I read the email several times, noting both its conciliatory tone and its careful avoidance of a direct apology. I forwarded it to Dr. Jenkins. "What do you think?" I asked during our next session. "What do you want?" she countered, in her typically direct way. I considered the question seriously. Not a fantasy reconciliation where they suddenly transformed into the supportive parents I'd always wanted. Not a continuation of complete estrangement, either. Perhaps something in between, a limited relationship with clear boundaries. "I want to be seen for who I am," I finally replied. "Not as a disappointment or a project or even as a success story they can now claim. Just as myself, with all my complexities and choices." "Then perhaps that's what you should tell them," she suggested. "See if they're capable of meeting you there." I composed a careful response to my mother, agreeing to meet when I was next in Boston for business. I specified a cafe near my hotel rather than our old family haunts, a neutral territory where we could begin this tentative reconnection. 2 weeks later, I sat waiting at a table by the window. My parents entered precisely on time, my father scanning the room methodically, while my mother spotted me immediately. They looked older than I remembered, more fragile somehow, though still carrying themselves with the dignity of people accustomed to professional respect. The initial greetings were awkward, physical contact limited to brief, stilted hugs. We ordered coffee and pastries, making small talk about the weather and my flight. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "We've missed you, Jenna," he said formally, as though delivering prepared remarks. "Your mother and I have discussed the events that led to your departure at length." I noticed he didn't specifically mention Adam's behavior or their own. "I'm glad you've been successful," he continued. "The design award was quite prestigious, I understand." "Thank you," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "My work has been fulfilling. But I didn't agree to meet to discuss my professional achievements. I wanted to address the relationship dynamics that made it necessary for me to leave." My mother flinched slightly. "Must we rehash old grievances?" she asked. "Can't we simply move forward?" I shook my head. Moving forward requires understanding how we got here. For years, I was treated as less valuable because I chose a different path. Adam's comments at his promotion party weren't an isolated incident. They were the culmination of a family culture that consistently undermined and dismissed me. My father started to object, but my mother placed her hand on his arm. There may be some truth to that, she acknowledged quietly. We had certain expectations, certain definitions of success. Your choices didn't fit those definitions, and we struggled to see beyond our own perspective. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more self-awareness than I'd ever heard from her. I appreciate that recognition, I said. What I need going forward is respect for my choices, my business, and my boundaries. I've built a life I'm proud of. If you want to be part of that life, it needs to be on terms of mutual respect. My father nodded slowly. We can try, he said. We're not perfect, but we can try. We spent the rest of the meeting establishing parameters for this new relationship. Monthly phone calls, occasional visits, no unsolicited advice about my career or personal life. I made it clear that any backsliding into old patterns would result in me stepping back again. They agreed, though I could see the effort it took my father to accept these terms. As we prepared to leave, my mother hesitated, then asked, "Will you be at Christmas this year?" We would. Very much like to have you there. I thought of the past 3 Christmases, spent with friends and Jordan's family, relaxed gatherings, free from performance or judgment. I'll consider it, I replied honestly. But if I come, Jordan would come with me. Your boyfriend, my father asked. Adam mentioned him. My partner, I corrected. He's an important part of my life. They exchanged glances, but nodded in agreement. Our relationship remained a work in progress. In the following months, some conversations flowed naturally, while others triggered old patterns that required gentle but firm correction. My father struggled more than my mother with accepting me as an equal rather than a daughter to be guided. My mother made genuine efforts to ask about my work with real interest rather than polite tolerance. Adam and I established our own cautious reconnection, mostly through occasional texts about neutral topics. He sent articles related to my industry. I congratulated him on professional milestones. We weren't the close siblings of our earliest childhood, but we weren't adversaries either. 6 months after our cafe meeting, I accepted an invitation to Christmas dinner, bringing Jordan with me. The evening had tense moments, but also genuine laughter. When my father began to lecture me about tax planning for my business, I calmly reminded him of our boundary agreement. To his credit, he stopped mid-sentence and apologized. That night in our hotel room, Jordan asked if I regretted reconnecting with my family. No, I said after careful consideration, but I don't regret leaving either. I needed to find my own worth before I could interact with them in a healthy way. The distance gave me perspective I couldn't have gained otherwise. The following spring, I was invited to deliver the commencement address at Philadelphia's Art College. Standing at the podium, facing hundreds of creative young people preparing to forge their own paths, I shared the lessons of my journey. Without naming my family directly, I told them, your worth isn't determined by degrees or titles or others' expectations. It's built through the courage to pursue your own vision, the resilience to weather rejection, and the wisdom to recognize when walking away is necessary for growth. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to create distance from those who cannot see your value. And sometimes, if you're fortunate, that distance creates space for new understanding on both sides. The most important lesson I've learned is that you don't need permission to define your own success. The path that others can't understand may be exactly the one you're meant to follow. Trust that journey, even when it's lonely. Build connections with those who celebrate rather than merely tolerate your choices. And remember that family can be found as well as born, created through mutual respect and genuine acceptance. As the graduates applauded, I spotted my parents and Adam sitting quietly in the back row. They had driven from Boston without telling me, a gesture that would have felt intrusive a year earlier, but now seemed like a genuine attempt to understand my world. After the ceremony, they approached, somewhat hesitantly, aware they were entering my territory rather than theirs. That was quite powerful, my father said, genuine respect in his voice. You've become quite the speaker. I always knew you were articulate, my mother added. But seeing you inspire all these young people. She trailed off, emotion making her uncharacteristically wordless. Thanks for coming, I said, including all 3 of them in my smile. Would you like to join us for lunch? My team has a table reserved to celebrate. They accepted. and for the first time, entered my professional world as guests rather than judges. As I introduced them to my colleagues and friends, I watched them struggle, and mostly succeed, at seeing me through others' eyes. Not as the family disappointment, but as a respected mentor, successful business owner, and valued friend. The journey wasn't complete, the healing not absolute. There would still be moments of miscommunication and old habits resurfacing. But standing there, surrounded by my chosen family and my birth family, I recognized that true independence had given me the strength to attempt reconciliation without losing myself in the process. The path forward wasn't about forgetting the past, but about ensuring it no longer controlled my future. The painful night at Adam's promotion party had ultimately forced me to claim my own narrative, to build a life based on self-defined success rather than external validation. That freedom was worth every difficult step of the journey. So, tell me, have you ever had to walk away from something familiar to find your true worth? I'd really love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.